I just carried on and didn't train, went back to Swift Current, and had very little understanding of what uh, binging on alcohol and drugs does to the brain and to the mental and to our mental health. And all of a sudden, I just leave to Swift Current and stop the drinking, stop the drugs about a week before because I'm like, oh shit, I got to go to training camp. And I got there and I had a complete mental breakdown, like complete mental breakdown. Felt like again, I couldn't tell anybody. 7 games into the season, I only had one goal, wasn't playing well, didn't want to be there. I actually packed my truck and drove 14 hours straight back to BC without, I think I told my coach, didn't even call him. Like I packed my truck, went to the rink, walked into his office and said, "Hey, I'm out of here. There's nothing you can do to stop me. I got to go." And I ended up like driving home and thinking that, this was the only option that I had. Now that I'm 36, I realize that like shit, there was a lot of people that wanted to help me that would have been able to help me,
Yeah.
but I felt like that didn't exist. And if I told anybody, then my life was going to be over. Little did I know my life was already
Right.
starting to crumble. And I mean, long story short, I went home, played in the BCHL, and did really well at like 9 points in my first 3 games playing on a line with Kyle Turris. And they illegally paid me some money to come play for them that I inevitably spent on partying. And I ended up getting traded to Everett. This is kind of a crazy story that I don't share often. So I told Dean, I was like, when I went into his office, I'm like, you could trade me to the Vancouver Giants or the Everett Silvertips. If it's not them, I don't even care if I play hockey. Like that's where I'm at, right? This was my mindset. It's just terrible, right? So, anyways, I go to Burnaby
And
Express.
is your mindset? Okay, go ahead.
Go
I
ahead.
was going to say your mindset, like you're just being more reactive now because of your
Yeah.
frustration with life and their situation, right? Yeah. Okay, I got you.
Yeah, like not even thinking big picture, just like I had been my whole life. It's like, oh, I'm feeling shitty, pick up my hockey stick. That's my medicine. It was like
Right.
start to drink, boom, drugs, whatever. With no real understanding of sort of the power of my choices on myself and others and all of that. And um I ended up getting traded to Everett about a month into my time with the Express and the BCHL. They'd given me this money. I'd spent the money. I got traded to Everett, and I remember Kevin Constantine called me and was like, "Hey Brady, like we're really excited to have you. I know you've wanted. I did want to play for Everett my whole life. When they were the expansion team, that was like the dream team I wanted to play for, and the whole thing. And so, like, I should have been excited, but I was like a mess. And he called me. He's like, "You're going to be playing with like Peter Mueller and Zach Hamill, 2 first rounders. Like." You got a good shot at being drafted this year. I'm going to teach you how to play defense because I know you suck at playing in your own end, pretty much is what he said,
We
which
all
was
do.
true,
Yeah.
which was true. And I remember I hung up the phone and my buddy was there with me, non-hockey guy, but a buddy of mine. I'm like, shit, man. I'm like, I'm not going. He's like, what do you mean you're not going? I'm like, I'm not going. I'm like, you got to call him back and pretend to be me and tell him you're not coming, that I'm not coming. So my friend Mike called Kevin Constantine, was like, "Hey, this is Brady Leavold. I'm not coming," and he hung up the phone on him like that, like
No way.
so
Oh
unprofessional,
my
like to Kevin
God.
Constantine, right? My dad, who's scouted in the Western League for like I don't know 20 years now, probably. He was away, and he actually works for Everett too, not then, but does now. And he was away on a conference, and he had no idea. Like if he was home, he would have made sure I got there. But by then, I had already said no, and the trade went back to Swift Current. And long story short, it didn't take long for me to get kicked out of my house. My dad tried to help, but I can't get into all the details. I was a mess. That I left. I went and moved in with my friend, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
ended up. I got to get through this kind of quick. I ended up going back to Swift Current. I called Dean in July of my 19-year-olds, like going into my 19-year-old season. I was like, "Look, I made a huge mistake. I really want to come back and play." He's like, "You're probably not going to make our team, not because you're not good enough, but because like you've had problems here and you've walked away on the team and all the things." He's like, "But if you come, we might be able to find you a place to play." And so I went, ended up making the team for the first half of the year. It didn't matter what I did. I was on the fourth line, maybe third line here and there. Started to fight a lot, but really struggling off the ice, missing practices because I'm too drunk to wake up and just trying to drown out my pain. And really caused a lot of problems off the ice. I ended up getting traded to Kelowna in my 20-year-old year. And I don't really know why I had such a good year. And like, I don't even care about the numbers. I think I had 70 points and 26 fights and led the team in goals in playoffs in the first round. And like, I don't even look at that and be like, that's my best year. I just know that from a mental health standpoint, where I was at in my life, like I felt really good about going to the rink and playing hockey. I didn't have any expectation of playing pro hockey. It was all about just this is my last year and it's going to be fun. I'm going to go be a firefighter because, as you guys know, hockey is a very small world. And when you have the problems that I just listed, I mean, it was a lot worse than that. People know, right? When you get your friend to
Yeah.
call
Right.
Kevin Constantine and tell him you're not coming, like
Yeah.
it's not a good look,
Yeah.
right? And again, because I didn't tell anybody, guys, about anything, and I would deny or deflect, it just opened up a whole can of worms for them to create whatever story that they wanted to believe. And so I just
Right.
thought there's no way I'm gonna make it to pro hockey after I quit and all this stuff. Anyways, my agent called me for the first time in a couple of years. He's like, "Hey Brady, like there's a bunch of teams calling about you because you had a really good year, and what do you think?" And I was like, "Well, shit, like how do you say no to that?" Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
right.
like even though up to that point I was like, oh, I'm just gonna be a fireman, but when your agent calls and it's like, here, like NHL contracts in front of you, NHL teams, it's like, well, I guess like this is all I know, so I'm gonna try it. I ended up signing the wrong contract. And again, I don't want to get into the details. Maybe I'll write it in my book, but somebody owned the Tampa Bay Lightning at the time or was in the process of acquiring it, let's just say, who his son played on my team in Kelowna and made a lot of promises, but then he got into some trouble in his own personal life and stuff. So, I mean, I was down on when that stuff happens, he's not worried about me. He's worried about his own life, and I don't hold anything against him for that. But I signed the wrong contract. Needless to say, I signed with the Tampa Bay Lightning organization. And again, you think like, okay, shit, man, like you're right there. You got an opportunity. This is what you've dreamed about since you were a young boy. But right in and around that time, I was like heavily introduced to cocaine, and it was like that was all I could do. And didn't train, didn't and you guys know pro hockey is a big step up from the Western Hockey League, even at the East
Mhm.
Coast level. Like it's a big step up. And I found out real quick that I wasn't in the best state physically or mentally to be there. And 4 games into my American League career, that's all I played. I blew my knee out and was prescribed OxyContin. And
Oh,
that's sort of where the rails really, if they weren't already off, they really fell off. And within a matter of months, I essentially lost everything, including my family. I was a young dad at the time, and my hockey career, and eventually it turned me into a full-blown addict of every street drug you can imagine: heroin, crack, crystal meth. I was doing it all. 2014, I was homeless on the streets in Vancouver, downtown East Side, where I spent close to a year. And you can imagine when you're that desperate, things are not in a good place.